welcome into OutKick the show. I'm your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having fantastic Mondays, wherever you may be across this great nation or around the world. I am taping early today because I've got to go out to LA for a few days. So I will do the show today. But if there's major news that has happened, we are taping right around 11 a.m. Eastern. Major news that has happened since then, when this airs at 3 o'clock Eastern, I am not ignoring it, but we just taped early. I will be on live with Clay and Buck here in about an hour, so chronologically the day is a bit flipped compared to normal. I'm in LA. I'm going to be doing the Clay and Buck show Tuesday, Wednesday, traveling back to Nashville on Thursday. No OutKick shows again until Friday, when Kelly Stewart and I will do the fade, and we will also do OutKick. So for those of you, for planning purposes, if you're sitting around asking where the show is in L.A. doing a bunch of meetings. So that is where we are headed. Going to break down, as a result, college football landscape that happened over the weekend. Had an awesome time down in Athens. Met a lot of you. Appreciate everybody there for the Tennessee-Georgia game. I will talk about the NFL action, and I'm going to talk about the Trump dance sweeping the nation from the UFC to the NFL, and Morning Joe, maybe the most dishonest show on daily television other than The View. My power rankings, I'd probably go The View 1, Morning Joe 2. No, actually, Joy Reid 2, Morning Joe 3 probably is my power rankings for left-wing dishonesty on a day-to-day basis. We will discuss all that, but I believe there is a Prize Picks read that I am supposed to be doing that is not up on the screen yet. So can we get that up? And I will do that, and then I will dive into college football. Prize Picks, best way to get on all the sports action in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, Texas, if you're feeling left out. Only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so your lineups stay in place even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half, doesn't come back, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Make your picks in less than a minute. Turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25%. To provide even more value for your lineups, download the app today. Use code OutKick to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code OutKick, $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, speaking of running the game, two, I would say, really major college football playoff outcomes on Saturday. One, Georgia beats Tennessee, comes back from a 10-0 deficit. I'll break down that game and where it leaves us in the SEC. Two, Kansas goes on the road, ends BYU's undefeated season. I will discuss that as well, but we begin with the SEC cluster. You now have Texas at 9-1, and then you have a whole bunch of teams sitting at 8-2. Where do we go from here? How do we break all this down? Well, it's fabulous you should be here because I've got your answers. First of all, Carson Beck played like the first-round draft pick that most people expected Carson Beck to be when the season began against Tennessee on Saturday night in Athens. There's going to be a lot. There has been a lot of complaints about the officiating. I thought the officiating was a mess, but I thought ultimately Tennessee was undisciplined and put itself in a position where it couldn't maintain the momentum after a 10-0 early lead. What do I mean by that in general? False starts, jumping off sides, dropping passes. There were a lot of things that Tennessee did poorly that had nothing to do with how the game was officiated. And in particular, I thought the game changed on a play that almost no one I've seen talking about at all. At the end of the first quarter, Georgia's got a 3rd and 8. They haven't had any success at all in the first quarter so far. They rush to the line. The clock is clearly going to run out. If you are aware in a football awareness sense, you probably would have expected that they're going to try to draw you off sides, and that if that doesn't work, they're going to let the clock run down, and probably wait to run the 3rd and 8 play to start the second quarter after being able to go back to the sideline, discuss it, not be rushed. That's what I was saying. Don't jump off sides. I'm saying it in my house watching this game, and it's quite clear to me that there is no basis whatsoever to expect a play to be run. Instead, Tennessee's best defensive player jumps offside. Carson Beck drew him offside, and then Carson Beck, with no pressure, knowing that he has already 5 yards in his back pocket, takes a shot, throws the ball into substantial coverage down the field. Receiver makes a big play, 38-yard gain. 4 plays later, early in the second quarter, Georgia scores 10-7. It's a whole new ball game. If Tennessee doesn't jump off sides there is a pretty good chance, again, it's 3rd and 8, that they get off the field against Georgia. Carson Beck had started very slowly, I think 3 for 10 in passing. The momentum was not there. And maybe Tennessee, at least statistically, would be likely, is going to get the ball back with a double-digit lead early in the second quarter. Instead, they make an error, and Georgia cashes in 4 plays later for a touchdown that makes it 10-7 and changes the fundamental trajectory of the game. The crowd was out of the game. Tennessee had withstood the early challenge, all those things. Georgia scores late, dominates the second half. Tennessee does not play well in the second half. After being tied up 17-17, Georgia goes on to win 31-17. Okay, so let me break down the SEC picture for you right now. The playoff committee, I think, has done a poor job of analyzing overall schedules and overall wins and losses, and I'm going to get into that in a moment. But I wanted to start with there are now 6 SEC teams. All of them have been defeated. Texas is 9-1, and then you have 5 8-2 teams. So there is a scenario where you end up with 6-2 in the SEC teams, and it becomes very, very difficult to figure out who is even going to Atlanta, who's going to go to the playoff. That would require, by the way, Auburn losing this weekend. Auburn beating Texas A&M this weekend, and that basically is a toss-up game. And then, on top of that, you would need Texas A&M to bounce back and beat Texas in the final week of the season. And then, while A&M would be 9-3 overall, you would have 6-2 in the SEC teams. That would be a total and complete mess for the conference, for the playoff committee, for everybody else, because it would be very difficult to figure out which teams deserve to be in the postseason. Now, what I think needs to be done, and I haven't seen anybody at all do this, is you need to just be objective, put all 6 of those teams on a page, like I did in the starting 11 that I'm reading from, and just rationally look at each of their resumes. And I did it. I said, okay, let's look at top 25 wins, and then let's look at whatever losses the teams have. And let's put them on paper, and let's look at this. And so I started off with Texas, 9-1. You know, Texas doesn't have a single top 25 win. And by the way, I mean top 25 wins right now, not when you played them. In other words, Tennessee doesn't get credit for NC State. Texas doesn't get credit for beating Michigan, who's sitting right now at 5-5 and nowhere near the top 25. Does that make sense? So I'm talking about teams that you have beaten that are presently in the top 25. Not one. In fact, by the way, happy early Christmas. Crockett Coffee, crockettcoffee.com. We are dominating. I'm drinking my coffee this morning because we're doing the show early. Even though you're seeing this at 3 Eastern, we're taping it at 11. Texas's best win this year, Vanderbilt. They beat Vanderbilt 27-24. That is the Texas Longhorns' best win. They lost at home, remember, to Georgia by 15. Okay? So, Texas 9-1, not one top 25 win. Their best win is Vanderbilt. Loss is Georgia at home by 15. Okay? They've played one top 25 team, Georgia. They lost at home by 15. That's Texas's resume. Georgia, top 25 wins. Clemson by 31 at a neutral site. Texas by 15 on the road, Tennessee by 14 at home. That's 3 really good top 25 wins for Georgia. Losses, Alabama by 7 on the road, Ole Miss by 18 on the road. Okay, so that's Georgia's resume. 8-2 Tennessee, top 25 wins, Alabama by 7 at home. Losses, Arkansas by 5 on the road, Georgia by 14 on the road. That is Tennessee's overall resume. Alabama, top 25 wins, Georgia by 7 at home, South Carolina by 2 at home. Losses, at Vanderbilt by 5, at Tennessee by 7. That is Alabama's resume. Again, looking at top 25 wins and in the losses. Ole Miss, top 25 wins, Georgia by 18 at home, South Carolina on the road by 24. Those are 2 pretty solid top 25 wins for Ole Miss. Losses, though, Kentucky by 3 at home, LSU by 3 in overtime. So neither of the losses of Ole Miss are against top 25 teams. And then finally, Texas A&M, top 25 wins, none. Losses, Notre Dame by 10 at home, South Carolina on the road by 24. Okay, so what stands out there? Texas and Texas A&M are the only teams without a current top 25 win among the 6 SEC teams with 2 or fewer losses. Georgia has the most top 25 wins, and Georgia is the only team to only lose to top 25 teams. So how would I break them down? I think leave aside wins and losses for a moment because, look, Georgia has played 5 top 25 teams. Texas has played 1. Like, comparing Georgia and Texas based solely on win-loss records is what a moron would do. You have to look at the quality of the competition and how you've performed against the quality of the competition. Georgia has played 5 top 25 teams, current top 25 teams. Texas played 1, Georgia. Think about that for a minute. So, if I rank them out there right now, Georgia is clearly the best SEC team, even though they have 1 more loss than Texas. The schedules are not even. Georgia has played a far more difficult schedule than anyone else in the SEC. Yes, they have lost some games, as one would expect against a very difficult schedule, but I've got Georgia as my number 1 overall team. All right, what about the second best team? I think it comes down to Tennessee or Alabama. Why do I say that? Ole Miss has lost to 2 non-top 25 teams. Yes, they have 2 top 25 wins, but they lost to 2 non-top 25 teams. Now, LSU has collapsed lately, 6-4, but they lost to Ole Miss at home. That is by far the worst loss of any of these teams. Ole Miss plays Texas this week. Kentucky plays at Texas this weekend. They are likely the Wildcats to go 1-7 in the SEC, with the only win being on the road in Oxford. That's a devastating loss to a resume. Combine that with the loss to LSU in overtime. That's tough, but LSU 6-4, we'll see how they finish. They're obviously not a top 25 team now. And so you look at that and say, okay, how do I compare that with Alabama, which has 2 top 25 wins? And how do I compare that with Tennessee, which has 1 and 1 road top 25 loss? To me, Ole Miss is out, and they are at 4. Their resume, based on that Kentucky loss at home, is inferior. And people say, well, Ole Miss beat Georgia. All these teams beat each other. So you can't just go to head-to-head. Ole Miss beat Georgia. Alabama beat Georgia. Georgia beat Tennessee. Tennessee beat Alabama. it's impossible to rank these teams solely based on head-to-head. So I would drop Ole Miss to 4. That then leaves, and by the way, I've eliminated Texas and Texas A&M from contention in my top 4 because neither team has got at least one top 25 win yet. So they're out of the mix. So that would then leave me with Alabama or Tennessee at 2 versus 3. Well, the question you have is Alabama's wins over South Carolina and over Georgia, does that cancel out their loss to Tennessee when we got them looking head-to-head? To me, no. Maybe you argue, yes, I can see Alabama at 2. I can see Tennessee at 2. I took Tennessee at 2 because head-to-head to me is dispositive because Alabama's schedule isn't so much better that you have to look at it and say, okay, well, let's toss out head-to-head when we're looking at these two teams side by side. So I would take Tennessee 2, Bama 3, Ole Miss 4. I drop Texas to 5. And then I have Texas A&M at 6. Texas has not played anywhere near the schedule that the other teams at the top of the SEC have. When you don't have a single top 25 win all season, your record, to me, should be diminished compared to other teams that have played several different top 25 opponents. Texas has played 1. Everybody else in the SEC has played at least 2. Georgia's played 5 current top 25 teams. That feels significant to me. And so when I go and I do my rankings, I'll get to that in a sec, but my SEC top 6, these are the 6 teams still alive for the conference title, still alive for the playoff. Georgia 1, Tennessee 2, Alabama 3, Ole Miss 4, Texas 5, Texas A&M 6. I think the logic is pretty clear. This is the kind of thing the playoff committee should be doing instead of just looking at records and using that as a proxy for how to rank teams. All right, now, then we go into the other big win, which I mentioned, which was Kansas goes on the road and beats BYU. Why is this significant? Rock, chalk, Jayhawk, congratulations to Kansas. It means that we are only going to have, I believe, one team out of the Big 12. It may be Colorado. It may be Arizona State. It may be BYU. It might be Iowa State. I don't even know. It could be a 3-loss team. Who knows? But the Big 12 champ is going to be the only team that gets into the playoff. And I actually think BYU is going to go on the road and lose to Arizona State. And I'm not even sure BYU is going to be in the Big 12 playoff game at all. And BYU fans got mad at me a couple of weeks ago, or last week, I guess it was, when I said Alabama, Georgia, or Ole Miss, for instance, would beat BYU on a neutral field. Yeah, I mean, that's not even debatable, I don't think. If they played 10 times, those teams would win 8 or 9 of those games. I really do believe that. And so you got BYU losing at home to Kansas. That knocks us down to one Big 12 team. It looks like SMU is going to play against Miami in the ACC championship game. I believe that means only one ACC team is going to get in. Clemson's out of the mix, okay? So if I'm correct about that, SEC champ, Big 12 champ, Big 10 champ, and the ACC champ, all 4 of those, plus right now it looks like Boise State is going to be the non-Power 5 team that gets in. That means there are 7 at-larges left for the Big 10 and the SEC and for Notre Dame, okay? So how does all of that break down? Really fascinating to see. But here is what my current playoff rankings would look like. And they're going to look different than most people because I actually am using logic in my brain as opposed to just looking at the results. Oregon got past Wisconsin. I've got them right now as the overall number 1 with them as the Big 10 champ. Then I've got Georgia as my projected SEC champ. I think Georgia's the best team in the SEC. Not sure they'll even make it to Atlanta. We'll have to see. Miami as the ACC champ. Then I've got Colorado as the Big 12 champ. We'll see whether or not that ends up happening. I got Ohio State as my 5. I think they will beat Indiana this weekend. Tennessee as my 6. Alabama as my 7. Ole Miss as my 8. Texas as my 9. Penn State at 10. Indiana at 11. And Boise State at 12. This means in my playoff, this week's rankings, Ohio State would host Boise State. Tennessee would host Indiana. Alabama would host Penn State. And Ole Miss would host Texas. Now, this is the resulting power rankings that I have right now for the SEC. Georgia 1. Let me give you my, I gave you my playoff. But I would have Georgia 1, Tennessee 2, Alabama 3, Ole Miss 4, Texas 5, A&M 6, South Carolina 7. Let me pause here for a moment. The Gamecocks are playing right now like a top 10, 15 for sure caliber team. 7-3, really lights out down the stretch. I think they're going to finish 9-3 and beat Clemson at the end of the year. We'll see whether I end up being correct about that. Missouri 8. Missouri has fallen off. They may finish 9-3. We'll see about that. Just really, Eli Drinkwitz's team has fallen flat. Every decent team, by and large, they've lost to. They were fortunate to get past Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. This could be very easily what are they right now? 7-3. They could be very easily 5-5. Vanderbilt, I've got at 9. 6-4 Commodores. Then we got Brian Kelly and LSU at 10. Brian Kelly, 6-1, 3 straight losses, A&M, Bama, now Florida. Congratulations to Billy Napier. It wouldn't shock me if Vanderbilt went on the road and beat LSU this weekend down on the Bayou. And if that happened, oh my goodness, Brian Kelly would be in even more trouble. He's already in a lot of trouble. Arkansas at 11. Florida at 12. Oklahoma at 13. Auburn at 14. Kentucky at 15. And Mississippi State right now at the 16th best team out there. That is how I would break all of this down. Now, there are a bunch of games that very few people are paying attention to that could upset the apple cart when it comes to the college football playoff in a really, really big way. Beginning this weekend, it would not at all be surprising if you actually go out and look at these top 25 matchups. Just for the record, you've got Indiana at Ohio State. I'll have my gambling picks up, but as I'm looking at this right now, Indiana's an 11.5-point underdog. Guys, if Indiana loses this game, I'm not sure the Hoosiers are getting in the playoff. They don't have a single top 25 win. They may end up without a win over a single team with a winning record. I'm not sure that they're going to deserve to get in over, for instance, a 10-2 SEC team when these resumes are actually examined. Flip side, if Indiana wins and Ohio State loses, Ohio State's not anywhere near as much of a lock as a lot of people want to believe because 10-2 Ohio State has a win over Penn State. Otherwise, not a lot out there on the resume that you'd be impressed by. Ole Miss on the road against Florida. Danger zone game for the Rebels. Florida playing better. Ole Miss has been bad enough to lose to Kentucky on the road in the swamp. That is not going to be an easy game. You've got a couple of others here that stand out. BYU on the road against Arizona State. Arizona State now favored to beat BYU. That would knock BYU out of the overall contention for probably the Big 12 championship game. Texas has got Kentucky. They are big favorites, but it's the week before the huge game against A&M. Kentucky coming off of, a really disappointing season, but they were good enough to go on the road and get the win against Ole Miss. Penn State on the road against Minnesota. Minnesota's not great, but Penn State's resume, if they lost this game, Other than Illinois, they don't have a win on the schedule that you would be impressed by. Colorado on the road against Kansas, watch out. Jayhawks playing really well. Colorado only a couple of points favorite. And then Texas A&M on the road against Auburn. Watch out there. Right now, A&M a 2.5-point favorite. I actually would not be stunned at all if Auburn found a way to get that win. And then Alabama on the road against Oklahoma at night. Really disappointing season so far for Oklahoma. But just watch out. Just watch out for the Crimson Tide in that game as you get ready for Auburn. Would not stun me if that game is closer than people expect. So my point on this is, and then, by the way, Notre Dame has games against Army and has games against SC. Tennessee has to go on the road against Vanderbilt. Then Alabama has to play Auburn, and Ole Miss has to play Mississippi State. There are still a lot of landmine games out there for teams that are contending for the playoff. Just FYI, worth breaking down. NFL reaction. I don't have as much time because I got the radio show coming up here shortly. Again, we're taping early. Biggest and best game of the day. Josh Allen and the Bills finally put a loss on the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm going to tell you this right now, and I hope that I am correct, as we sit here basically at the midpoint, a little bit past the midpoint of the NFL season. My forecast for the Super Bowl, and I hope I don't get struck by lightning here, Bills-Lions. I think the long-suffering fan bases of the Buffalo Bills and the Detroit Lions are going to match up in the Super Bowl down in New Orleans. Best team right now, I believe, in the NFC is the Lions. In fact, I think the Lions are the best team in the NFL, period. And then on the flip side, I think the best team in the AFC, clearly the Chiefs have found ways to win. There are lots of good teams in the AFC, but I think this is the Bills' year. I think the Bills are going to find their way to the Super Bowl. So my projection right now, NFL action, Bills against the Lions in the Super Bowl. How fantastic would that be? Two other stories that I want to hit here before I sit down and start getting ready for Clay and Buck. The Trump dance has taken over. John Jones wins the UFC event, does the Trump dance, and goes and takes his belt to Donald Trump. Pretty incredible. Saturday night action. I need to talk about the Tyson-Paul fight, too. I forgot about that. But Saturday night, big-time win. John Jones does the Trump dance and salutes Trump sitting ringside in Madison Square Garden. Also, you had the Raiders players on. The Raiders, the Titans, and the Lions do the Trump dance as well. What's going on here? It's a major cultural shift. We have gone in the space of a few years from the NFL players taking knees during the national anthem and criticizing America for being a fundamentally awful racist nation to now everybody coming together, white and black, to celebrate and do your touchdown or big sack play or big win, the Trump dance. I think it's indicative of a major cultural change. And OutKick has been on the right side of all of this. We were right about the fact that Colin Kaepernick and the NBA players and everybody out there that was trying to say, oh, America's an awful racist place, that they were wrong. That America is probably the least racist country that's ever existed in the history of the world. And I don't say that hyperbolically. I believe that to be true. But I think what you're seeing is young men are over the BS. And the celebrations there, the sort of acknowledgement of Trump is a sign that young men have fundamentally rejected the woke culture of the United States. And we saw this of the left in the United States. And we saw this in the election results, where young men, overwhelmingly white, black, Asian, Hispanic, moved in the direction of the Republican Party. But when you see athletes of a variety of different races, young men, all embracing Trump, It is a sign that the woke universe, this idea that men could be women and win women's championships, is collapsing everywhere. And Democrats were aware that this was happening, but their solution for it was Tim Walz. Remember when they tried to introduce him as Coach Walz? It's one of the funniest things in retrospect out there that Democrats thought the answer for their collapsing male support was to go with Tim Walz, who was going to connect with all of these young male voters. It's just failed. And so right now, Democrats and the woke universe is in extreme cultural retreat. And a lot of people who wouldn't have admitted to voting for Trump in the past are not only voting for Trump, they are endorsing him. I was at Mar-a-Lago on Thursday night for dinner. You may have seen my pictures with Sylvester Stallone, Elon Musk. Both were having dinner right with me with Trump there. It was a total evisceration of woke culture that was personified and continues to be personified by all these athletes stepping up and signifying their support for Trump. Friday night, I was in an Athens, Georgia hotel room. I watched the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight. And it's funny, I interviewed Josh Heupel on Friday night before the Tennessee-Georgia game. And as our crew was setting up everything there, and they could all testify to this, I was having a conversation with them about something that almost no one talks about, which is we don't have the ability to concurrently stream the biggest events in the United States. The tech capacity is just not there. I had this conversation with people that are way smarter than me at Fox a couple of years ago for the Super Bowl, and they were walking me through it, and they said, look, we don't have the technological ability to stream the Super Bowl. I don't think that most people have realized that fact yet. And so nobody's really certain what the total number of concurrent streamers that can be carried is, because it's still to be determined. But I was having that conversation. I was like, I think this Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight is going to be so popular that Netflix is going to have major issues with being able to get everybody on to watch it. And then what happens? Probably, if you're out there watching this right now, I bet you had an issue trying to get into that stream and watch it in 4K or whatever it is without any buffering, without any time constraints. Eventually, I got in, but I was like 10 minutes behind, but I didn't even want to change it. And so Netflix came out and said 60 million or whatever it was, people watched it. I don't know how many concurrents that actually was, because a lot of people couldn't actually stream it. But I think it's a real danger zone for their Christmas Day game between the Steelers and the Chiefs, which is a heck of a game. And we will see exactly how all of that shakes out for them. But the streaming technology for live, it's different when it comes to streaming a video. They're better able to handle that traffic. But when it comes to live, Netflix has now had a couple of different issues. They had a major issue with the Love Show, whatever that was. I think Nick Lachey was going to host it live, and Love Is Blind. Was it Love Is Blind? I think was the show. They were going to do a live reaction show, and it crashed. They couldn't handle it. Now they basically had the Tyson-Paul fight crash as well. In terms of the actual boxing, I thought that Jake Paul could have knocked out Mike Tyson if he wanted to. The commentating was a mess. I don't know why Rosie Perez was one of the commentators. All Roy Jones could say was he didn't like Mike Tyson's legs. That was true. Tyson did not move very well. Tyson looked 58 years old. I think Jake Paul could have knocked him out if he wanted to. And I think Jake Paul knows that he could have knocked Mike Tyson out. And I think he actually chose not to do it because Tyson was in no way really able to defend himself. And Jake Paul was so much better at moving that there was never any real peril that he was in. I don't even remember Tyson being able to land a punch anywhere close to him. Now, reports are that Jake Paul got $40 million. and that Mike Tyson got $20 million. Good for them for banking a lot of money. Netflix certainly got a lot of attention. I was rooting for Mike Tyson. I used to play Mike Tyson's Punch-Out back in the day. Mike Tyson was the baddest man on the planet. I still remember when Mike Tyson lost and got knocked out by Buster Douglas. I didn't have HBO. We never had HBO at my house. My dad wouldn't pay for it for my entire life. In fact, I didn't have HBO till I got to college. I think it was included on the college package. And then because I pay for every streaming service and every premium channel basically on the planet, of course, we've always had it at my house since I've been an adult. But my dad would never pay for it. I don't think my dad's ever had HBO. But for those of you who are around my age, you remember back in the day, you used to get an HBO free preview. And when you would get an HBO free preview, you'd be able to watch old fights, everything else. My grandma had an HBO free preview for whatever reason. And that fight happened in the middle of the night. But my dad and I went down to my grandma's house because it was such a stunner that Mike Tyson got knocked out by Buster Douglas. I think I was like 11 years old, something like that. I remember going to my grandma's house because she had a free preview of HBO to watch that fight because no one could believe it happened. And even like ESPN SportsCenter back in the day when they would put fights on pay-per-view, they wouldn't give the highlight rights, so they would have to show still photographs. Some of you out there are like, there's no way this actually happened. Yes, they had to show still photographs of the Mike Tyson fight. You could show like the press conference, but you couldn't show the fight itself. So it was like this crazy event that happened overnight in Japan, and nobody knew what happened, and everybody was in shock over it. And I just remember going and watching it on HBO. So I have always been on my grandma's free HBO preview. I have always been a fan of Mike Tyson. I was rooting for Mike Tyson. He is my favorite boxer of all time. Like I said, if you grew up around my age, Mike Tyson was the baddest man on the planet. Those leather shorts that he would walk in on, badass towel with just a hole cut through it that he would walk in on his shoulders. I remember being in Little League Baseball. Again, we didn't have HBO, but we were staying in a motel for the Little League Baseball tournament. I was probably like 11 or 12. And I remember it was rare to get to watch a Mike Tyson fight live. Most of us, at least my age, didn't have HBO when Mike Tyson would fight, so you'd have to catch up on him, like see the fight replayed or whatever else. I remember I was staying in a motel in like Hohenwald, Tennessee, I think, which is kind of middle of the nowhere. And we were playing in a Little League Baseball tournament. And I still remember to this day that Mike Tyson was fighting Carl the Truth Williams. And everybody, we all got to stay up late at that time and got to watch, because we were staying in a motel that had HBO, Mike Tyson fight. And I can't tell you how excited all of us were, like 10, 11, 12 years old, whatever we were, Little League Baseball playing kids, and our dads and moms were. Everybody was so excited to be watching that fight because, no, I don't remember hardly anybody having HBO back in the day, but that's the extent to what Mike Tyson was, just this mythological figure that you rarely ever got to see when you were my age. And so I've always been a fan of Mike Tyson, but I remember watching him. He knocked out Carl the Truth Williams, if I remember correctly, caught him in like the midsection. Didn't even catch him with like the uppercut. Back in the day, that was the fear of Mike Tyson, would you get caught on the uppercut. I think he caught him like in the midsection and just knocked him out, like basically knocked him through the ropes. Pretty incredible. So that's my take on the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight. Finally, how utter and complete has Donald Trump's victory been, as he is getting the most votes in the history of any Republican candidate? They're still counting crazy 13 days later in California. The final tally's not known. It looks like he's going to have 77, 78 million votes. Kamala is going to end up around 3 million or so fewer than Trump in the popular vote. But Morning Joe, I shared the clip this morning. Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough on Friday went to Mar-a-Lago, bent the knee, and basically said, "You are our king, Donald Trump. MSNBC is in shambles right now. The same thing is true of CNN. Their ratings have collapsed. Their legitimacy is basically non-existent. And right now you have got them meeting with Trump, begging basically to be considered a part of the overall media landscape. I'm not sure we've ever seen anything like this, guys. So that is the absolute latest. I'm going to sit down here and do Clay and Buck now. I love all of you. I'll be back Friday with The Fade and another OutKick show. If you're in LA, you see an incredibly good-looking man who looks like Clay Travis, that's probably going to be me. I'll be out there Tuesday, Wednesday, fly back Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, fly back Thursday. Got a bunch of meetings to do out there. Love all of you. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. I'm Clay Travis. This has been OutKick, the show.